And so as these shadows go throughout the year, there's a statue here, and a statue here, and a statue here, and a statue here. And these mark the equinoxes, like I said. And when you know the equinoxes, you can also determine the solstices. So the point is that Easter, being a religious holiday to the Christians, which was actually taken over from much older, what you would call pagan traditions, but it really goes all the way back to Egypt. And it was basically marking the beginning of spring, because life and your crops and your harvest would all begin in spring when the sun has resurrected. This is why they say Christ, which is the Son, is risen. The Son of God, so to speak, is risen, and that's your salvation. It's really the actual sun, the actual burning, firing sun that they're talking about. And so the point is that March 20th would be right here when the shadow of this obelisk hits this statue. It's the spring equinox, or March 20th, in the Julian calendar. And Easter was their big holiday to celebrate the spring, the coming of the Christ, or Christos, which is the crystalline consciousness, which is the sun. So they would celebrate this as it's a lunar holiday. So you can track the moon by knowing where the sun is. So the first Sunday after the first full moon, after this date right here, when this shadow hit March 20th, would always be Easter. So it would change a little bit. It still changes. That's why Easter changes a little bit each year, because it's based on the moon. All the holidays that are based on the sun, they don't change. They're exactly the same date every year. And all the holidays that are based on the moon, they fluctuate a little bit. Easter, being a lunar holiday, is the first full moon. It's the first Sunday after the first full moon after March 20th. So this is why this entire structure, built by Bernini and funded by the Pope, I believe it's one of the Pope Gregory's, was basically tracking the sun so that it would know all these celestial events as if God. All right, so about the Annunciation and the Archangel Gabriel. Since the 4th century, the Feast of the Annunciation, also known as the Incarnation, when supposedly the Archangel Gabriel announced to Mary that she would become pregnant and bring forth a son, had been fixed on March 25th, which is 9 months, that is, the period of human gestation, before December 25th, which supposedly marked the birthday of Jesus. So here we have another confirmation that these solar alignments that the church has been following, that are natural cosmic orders, that the sun, the day and the night, the winter and the summer, all the zodiacal signs the church has been charting and following, these are all ancient Egyptian Hermetic principles that they've adapted or stolen. And the stories, here's the point, the story of the Annunciation, the story of the Archangel Gabriel, the story of Mary or Isis giving birth to Horus or Jesus, is always on a celestial day. It's always on this same day. It's always on the spring equinox. So my point is that whether or not you believe in Jesus or not is it's up to you. It doesn't matter to me. But the point is that the story that you've been given, that you've heard all your life for thousands of years, is just a story based on the sun. Continuing on. Since time immemorial, the common folk of Europe celebrated their feast, especially the divine birth cycle of 9 months from the vernal equinox to the winter solstice, according to the true astronomical solar year. This meant that any dislocation of the feast days relative to the position of the sun could cause a deep psychological disturbance in the populace, since very superstitious and still very susceptible to heavenly events. The Virgin Mary, after all, was the Queen of Heaven, and surely her gestation cycle had to be fixed to the true cycle of the sky. That's why she's called the Queen of Heaven. She's a solar, celestial event affixed to the sky. Let us retain this thought, for as we shall see, the alignment of the old basilica, which was aligned to the true vernal equinox and was still standing in 1506 when Bernini began to chart out St. Peter's Cathedral, when work began for the new basilica, St. Peter's Cathedral, was to cause a curious confusion with the architects concerning its layout. Let us state in passing that we see the Reformation in the calendar and calling it the Gregorian calendar with the Pope's name as yet another clever act of counter-Reformation propaganda by the Vatican aimed at the Protestants. This is made evident by the immediate rejection of the Gregorian calendar in Protestant countries. Indeed, Britain and the colonies, including North America, introduced it only in 1752. But more than the calendar, we also see the grandiose establishment projects of Rome, starting with the building of the new St. Peter's Basilica in 1506, the Sistine Chapel, and the raising of ancient obelisks, Egyptian obelisks, by Pope Sixtus V in 1586, and many other impressive projects as part of the propaganda warfare. Just a little segue here. It's pretty interesting that the word propaganda was actually built, created, and coined by the Catholic Church. It's a word we use all the time in political spheres to mean like misleading information on purpose. And here's where it actually became, where it started. Saint Ignatius of Loyola. In fact, the term propaganda was first coined when the Pope Gregory XV established the Propaganda Fide, whose full official title is the Sacred Congregation for Propagating the Faith. It was no secret that the Jesuit order was originally used as the main proponent for the counter-Reformation against the Lutheran Protestants. So here, the Jesuits, I don't know if you can see this guy, Ignatius, the Jesuits, have long been established. The Jesuit order, which means the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits, has long been established as a media campaign for the church. So they were really big into editing sacred texts. They were very powerful in deciding what texts got in and what texts got out. And they were very influential, and still are today, as to how Bibles are printed and how they're edited and how they're dispersed around the world. So that's a little segue about propaganda. So there you have it. There's a lot more than meets the eye when you go into a church, a cathedral, especially these ancient ones. They're almost always built in relation to the human body and the solar alignments, or the solar cross. So the next time you go into a church or a cathedral, look up to the sky and pay attention to what day it is and what the sun is doing, or what Horus is doing on the horizon. Thank you guys for listening.